I must confess two things. One is that what he has said is a setup. So yes, I'm sure you were expecting the way you described me. It was supposed to be much larger, but this is the space, the only space God has given me. Yes, like I said, I was born in a hurry. The world needed me. So they said, Proverbs, angel, send him down. We'll send flesh later. I will not also tread the same path as the last speaker. I do not have the same kind of fire, and I have my energy. My energy is for long distance. I'm not a short distance person. So I'm going to discuss, I'm going to make it more interactive, because the truth is that in growth, there is no individual wisdom. That's why these fingers are like this, because it's not because one is better than the other. It's because each of them is divinely positioned for its own exceptionality by being uniquely different. So sometimes our greatness is in our perceived inferiority. So it's always good when we come together to reason together. So I'm not coming to teach you anything. I have already learned from somebody here, and I'm also hoping to benefit from him here. And there are more that we will talk about outside of here. So I'm been tasked with the dangerous topic of discussing the global economy. Why I say it's a dangerous topic is that there are certain topics you don't discuss like a teacher in public. You do not discuss global economy or global business because everybody knows it somehow. And you do not discuss football because everybody knows it somehow. So I will still try. I will talk about a few things which are current, which is issues of the fears of inflation, recession, and things like that. But as I speak, some of the things may not sound positive. But like I said to some people yesterday, life is about a balance sheet. Whenever you see an asset, you see anybody displaying an asset here, you know there is a liability hiding somewhere. Do you understand? And whenever you see someone complaining about the liability, it means that he has used that liability to create an asset somewhere. The same thing in terms of our skills. That which people laugh at you about means that you are special in some way because you are different. So, an elephant and a squirrel can form a good partnership because they may eat similar foods, but the elephant can only pick the ones on top of the table, the squirrel can pick the ones under the table. So, you are not inferior because you are like a squirrel, and you are not necessarily superior because you are an elephant, because there are some parts of your body you cannot scratch. So, we will go together. What we see today in terms of some form of global crisis, there are two schools of thought that we have. One school of thought at the beginning of the year was that this inflation was temporary. So a lot of governments said, don't worry, it will be all right. Another school of thought said, no, this is not temporary, this is a long thing. So I would say I prefer the second school of thought because sometimes the world is leaning towards democracy. And democracy puts a lot of pressure for information. So information has to go out, and there's also a lot of pressure today in the world for all information to be nice. So some words have been banned today. There's no short, there's no fat, there's no ugly, there's nothing that sounds negative somehow. So it's so difficult for me to describe him separate from him because I have to use nice words or words that appear nice. And at the end of the day, you are confused about what I'm talking about. So governments are under pressure to give hope, even when they do not have the hope to give. They're under pressure to look good because in a short time, people will choose a new government or choose to have confidence in them. So it's not just Africa, it's all over the world. And so there is a new approach, which is, let's find a solution while I'm there. That seems to be the norm. Let's find a solution while I'm there. Tomorrow will solve itself when whoever takes over tomorrow. Because a lot of times, the road to an efficient or a sustainable recovery requires long-term stability of policy. And that's why economic recovery tends to look like it is favoring countries like China, because they can virtually predict which party will be in power in 5-10 years time, virtually. But in some other countries, you cough a little, the other party becomes stronger. The other party's policy is everything that you do not stand for. It doesn't matter what it is, it's just to find something different, so that as soon as you fail, there's another option. So there is no connectivity in saying, let's come together and look at the combined benefit of the country. So that selfishness is coming into government. So they have to tell you there's hope. But when we look at some of the genesis of this crisis, it's not today's crisis that is happening today. It's sometimes some of yesterday's crisis that was deferred and deferred. When the financial crisis started, governments had to come together, and there were two schools of thought. One was spend your way out. The other one was save your way out. But those that were saving their way out were saving for a long-term future, and they were struggling to keep themselves in power. So they had to spend. So more and more governments have to spend. And to spend what you don't have, it means you are borrowing. And the interesting thing in today's debt world is that if both of us are the only two, hypothetically speaking, if the two of us are the only two countries in the world, it means that I can only borrow from you, and you can only borrow from me. Then why don't we borrow from each other perpetually? And as long as I'm able to pay you back in a way we have agreed, and you're able to pay me back, what will be fine? So they began a gradual fear, a gradual, what I call it, step back from the fear of debt. So governments started borrowing more to get out of immediate. And part of the reasons why you spend, why you say spend your way out, is that spending creates employment. You can see a government just decides to start doing roads. Because when you do those roads, you will employ people to do the roads. And those people will have money to spend. And they will spend on other people who are selling drinks along the road. And those ones will spend on people who are selling snacks. And those ones will spend on people who are selling clothes. And those ones will spend on people who are opening schools for school fees. And it creates that cycle. That's why governments like to spend when there is a recession. It's to just create that pause in the economy and bring back everything to life. So there was that spend, there was that borrowing, but even in that borrowing, they say, okay, there will be a time when they will have to slow down and pay back. So just as they were trying to get out of it, there was some small issue of COVID that came. So it started like a small issue, it became a bigger issue, and they could not find a formula. They tried all manner of things, it looked like they were lying. They said lock up, it somehow vanishes inside, it's like mosquito. Somehow some people still got it even though they were locked up. Okay, open up, some people still got it. Okay, use this, some people still got it. It was complicated, and even science that we have begun to worship in the past few years, because science is excellent, science is perfect. Science was confounded and science could not answer it. And so that COVID meant you have to delay this economic repayment to spend again, because they were scared that once there was that recession, people will be afraid to spend, there will be a lockdown, and the economies will shrink. So to prevent another recession, they went into another round of borrowing. They had to do COVID relief here and there. So You had to borrow to pay your other debt, and before you could finish paying, another debt had come. So you are now owing a bigger one. So in all this, what was happening was that interest rates were low. Low interest rates try to stimulate people to spend from two directions. One is that there is no encouragement, not too much encouragement to save. Save is like the enemy of spending. So what are you saving for if there is no interest? The interest on savings was virtually non-existent, especially in the European economies. So why do you want to save so you can spend? And then the appetite for borrowing, the cost of borrowing was low, so you could use your credit card. So credit can double your capacity to spend. And that's part of the difference between the Western world and some of the African countries. They lack credit. So they have a hidden potential. So it means that they cannot spend. So it means they're poor. But what it also means is that they have a hidden potential. So it means if they have credit, they can do much better. Okay, so that's part of what we have to look at. Every bad news contains a hidden potential, which means it's tomorrow's economic target or tomorrow's economic growth may be lying in that bad news or that hidden potential. So they went into, so all that was dragging, so interest rates were low for a long time. So every time they tried to bring back the interest rates in order to recover from the spending, from the issues, another issue came. Then the last issue that came was the Ukrainian issue, where some people had to move around. And even money had to move around again. It means another issue. But before it came, the inflation was coming, which meant that for many years, prices were a bit stable, salaries were a bit stable. But stability is not always as sweet as it sounds. Stability is comfort. But stability is also lack of growth. So some people want to progress. And then in the middle of another catalyst that happened during the COVID is the supply chain issue. Because the world had become so linked and interconnected that if you want to produce a computer in America, it has gone, all the parts have gone through 5-6 countries around the world. So the man who is producing it, his chip is coming from either Singapore or Thailand or Taiwan or even China, and that is coming from some other place that is bringing workers from Bangladesh, from India. So there's quite, and then the software is somewhere else. The help desk is somewhere else. Then the marketing office is somewhere else, and the registers, the head office is somewhere else. So there's a lot of chain. The world has gotten used to a global efficiency, which is that for every product that is produced, it's better you break your product into the most efficient sub-component production site. So when COVID came and there was no movement, no matter how digital you are, you cannot easily virtually manufacture. Okay. I've never seen anybody who eats virtual pounded So that question of at the end of the day, when we finish all these moving things, I have not seen people who sat down one day and used fork and knife and or an apron and sat down and say they want to eat Bitcoin. So in the end, you have to liquidate that thing to buy something tangible or to produce something tangible. Something has to be produced. Something has to be eaten. Something has to be touched in the end. No matter how digital we get, until we become robots. And even robots need physical parts. So that reality came, and when we hear supply chain thing was that ships were not moving, things were not moving around. So suddenly, okay, we can now start producing. When all of us open our factories at the same time, it means we all need materials almost at the same time. It means who gets it first becomes an issue. So for me to get it first, I have to be willing to pay more than the next person. And that changes the pricing pattern of many things. And until the chain is finished, before we can settle down and say, okay, there's a price. But other things begin to move. So the man who has to pay school fees cannot wait for that. He has to he has to up his own price in order to afford this food. So everything, the chain of pricing starts to move around, and then we begin to see inflation gradually. And so it brings us to another thing, which is what at the back of these things, countries are reacting differently and countries move differently, because that's how the world is. The world is not everything that reflects immediately. Even COVID did not start in every country at the same pace. So whenever you see an issue happening in one country, you have to analyze that issue and ask yourself, is there any way it can get to where I am or where I'm going to be? And how long will it take? What are the chain effects that can happen? So when you do that, okay, for example, we're discussing house prices. In the COVID era, the house prices went up in some countries. So surprising. But what happened was that what people did not know was that COVID over-adjusted. When you over-prepare for a problem, it was a prepared recession, or rather a prepared shutdown. So people were warned, governments were warned, we are going to shut down on so dates. That was different from the financial crisis, where suddenly nobody was prepared, things started happening, then banks started writing to banks, and there was now foreclosure. That's a panic. But when you say you are going to close, it's like the 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. People begin to gather. And people gather, and government says, what can possibly happen when people close? We need to provide for this, provide for that. So government started paying people for not working. So people had more money than they had in real life, and less things to spend it on. There was no nightclub. Do you understand? There was no fashion show football. There was no football for a while. Do you understand? So how does that affect? Because if you have to buy uniforms, just look at uniforms. The gentleman that came here is talking about is a fashion expert. The demand for uniforms in some areas, maybe the factory workers started picking up later, and the health workers was picking up. But the demand for other uniforms really dropped. Some producers of office wear, where you wear suit and tie, so they had no sales for almost 1 year. There was no need to wear a white shirt and tie, suit. You just sat down with Zoom. Your old white shirt, which is now trying to be yellow, was better. Was okay. So you see a whole part is eliminated. You don't need 5 clothes. You understand? So many things were off the market, and that was, it meant more cash. And a lot of countries, in some countries, interest rates was reduced so that they can spend. So housing became a cheap target, because the first sets of people exited the housing market in panic, because they said, I don't want to tie down my cash with house. So once house prices moved down a bit, everybody started pouncing on it. It started with North America and Canada. House prices that had not moved for years started skyrocketing, almost double. In the US, it started happening, and then it started moving out of there, moved to some places in Europe. But what that does is that a global house hunter, when he sees that the prices have gone to a point in the country that it's not sweet, he moves to another country. So you now have the effects of other global predators coming to your own country to move your own house price. So that's how some things move on. So your house prices do not have to be moved by you. You just need a couple of rich people, some say Asians or whatever, they come in and they take your market. So those things started happening. But part of why you have this global imbalance is also the issue that countries grow over the years. Countries have grown in steps. But some countries have not taken those steps. They've taken a wrong move, and so they suffer more than the other countries. And one thing we should be aware of, I'll go back to that shortly. One thing we should be aware of is generic data and the dangers of averages. Because when you see people prescribe an economic solution that seems to be general. Today they say increase interest rates to fight inflation. I personally don't believe it works for every country. There are certain factors, peculiarities with some countries that it may even be more dangerous. There are some drugs that you give to one person that will heal him. You give it to another person that will kill him. So those are things that we have to look at, because you cannot, if you say you want to buy a shirt as a man, and you say, I want to buy the average shirt, you go to the market and say, they should buy you the average shirt of a man. It doesn't work, because you may not be an average man. So what is available in that economy? But the truth is that in some economies, you have to look what part of this GDP is controlled by the government of that country. So some governments, like maybe Nigeria, so you say the government has a very little part compared to the overall GDP, but it has a big part of the responsibility. So it's like the balance sheet that is not balanced. You want to control everything, but you only have the power for a little. So that causes a lot of imbalance. So in that case, so that imbalance is a problem. But it's also an opportunity. It means that there's somebody else that has money within your system. So that's another way to look at it. So it means there's money within your system. It's just that it is not with government. So some people say recession is that some human beings, some individuals have become richer than governments. But in a recession, one thing you should know, or when they say the economy is bad, nobody gathered dollars and bought it somewhere. No, money has moved from noisy people to quiet people. Money only moves. So, which goes back to what we said in the Bible, which we also say, it's not just about the quality of the seed or the quality of the soil. That the farmer can try to solve as much as his money can buy. But it's about also knowing where the rain will fall. So it's really about divine positioning. In all these movements, there is opportunity. In war, people make money. In crisis, people get richer. But what is God saying to you in the midst of all these things? And there was a Ruth, there was Naomi. You talk about Ruth and Naomi and talk about all their faithfulness. But you forget about Boaz. Naomi left the land because there was famine. But they came back to become servants of somebody. Boaz did not just vanish. He was there. In that same land that there was famine. He remained and became rich. So there's also the story of Boaz. There's the story of Isaac that dug another well. And it wasn't just about the quality of the soil or whatever. He just got, well, some of you have happiness in you because you have Christ in you. And it will happen because you are there. So sometimes you don't chase things. And I say, I always look at the concept of chasing money as the story of Judah and Tamar. I like to talk about the story of Judah and Tamar a lot because let's look at Judah as money. So Tamar, some of you may not know the story. Don't pretend. It's okay. It's not being part of the Old Testament. Okay. Tamar was the daughter-in-law of Judah. Judah had 3 sons. So one son was married to Tamar, the first son, and then he died. And then Tamar was inherited by the second son. And yeah, they're about to chase me. Tamar inherited the second son, or rather the second son inherited Tamar. But God said he was wicked because he didn't want to impregnate her. He would sleep with her, but he didn't want to impregnate her. But the truth is that, why was he wicked? Because tradition had it that if they had a son, that son would belong to the dead man, which meant that that son would overtake him in inheritance. So he was selfish. He wanted his own with his own wife and not the inherited one. So God took him off and said, God killed him. So God does some things that you may say is wicked, but not really wicked. Just so there was now this last son again. Tamar came back to Judah and said, how far with this small one? He said, it's not yet good. I said, I will wait. Judah said, in his mind, he said, Kai, this one that's killing all my children. that's what your parents will suspect, your African parents will say. That this man is no man again. So Judah started posting and started saying, okay, come back. So he secretly arranged for the boy to marry another. So Tamar now here, because, and then Tamar still, she now changed her strategy. So let's assume Judah is a real one. He was just asking for the last son. So you are looking for the remnant of money, which is what you're chasing. And as you chase it, it runs. And as you chase it, it runs. So what Tamar did was she went to wait for Judah. Stop chasing. Went to wait for Judah. And then Judah, in his ways, was going on a journey, and he bribed one tent and to ease himself with a prostitute. So he was behaving like a destitute. And he needed to be put in an institute. So he now went there, and then some months later, there was not a story, a rumor in the village story that Tamar was pregnant. He said, how can? They said she must testify, or that they will still have to. That's what I said, tell us why we should not even stone you. They say, just there's this stuff that this man's going. He just shifted when he saw red and white something. You see, it's the person that owns this. He said, shh. No, so it turns out that, let's assume that last song is the crumbs of money. When you chase that crumbs of money, you get nothing. But when you wait for money, money comes to you and gives you the father of money. So it's about positioning yourself. That working for money is really from allowing money to work for you. You were created to be superior to money. It's really, this world was created about you. Money is a tool. Money is the result of the things that your fathers named. When Abraham named things and named animals, he had not named money. So it was later that the things that we created now created this thing that we now turn back to worship. So position yourself. Ask God where you should be. It's not where everybody will be. Different countries will perform differently. And every problem, one of the things I do is I help my company invest and grow businesses. I say that I like problems because problem is opportunity, and opportunity is profitability, and profitability is prosperity. So look for problems, and you will find prosperity. As you fix the problems, you will do two things. One, you will prosper. Two, you will touch lives. So they are not mutually exclusive. So, but for you to do that, you have to dwell in the sacred places of the Most High, to abide under the shadow of the Almighty, to protect you and to give you the secrets that ear has not heard, eye has not seen, neither has any mind conceived. So, as you hold on to God and as He divinely positions you, everybody's problem will not be your problem.